Excuse me, have you ever heard of wire transfer scams?
The face of the bank employee was stern. He seemed concerned about me, an elderly man who wanted to withdraw a large sum of money, suspecting it might be a scam. While I appreciated his sense of justice, it put me in a bit of a bind. No matter how much I deny that it is not a scam because I need that money for work, he never listens to me. Finally, he said, "I'm terribly sorry, sir, but as of today, due to the manager's decision, our senior customers cannot use our services." He was clearly prejudiced against seniors, assuming they're all susceptible to scams. My wife silently observed his behavior from the side. Having reached the end of her patience, she began to laugh mischievously.
Hey, could you get in touch with the manager?
My name is John Smith. I'm 66 years old. I retired a few years ago and now live in New York City with my wife, Linda. Since retiring, I've been enjoying my second life. I stay busy with community volunteer work, such as helping ensure the safety of elementary school children in traffic, and sometimes managing the reception at local events. I'm also registered with a senior employment agency, so when I have time, I do some simple tasks. My days are fairly enjoyable.
Well, I'm off then. Take care.
My wife Linda, wearing a light pink jacket, left the house.
Linda is a career woman, still working very energetically. Despite her busy schedule, she seems content with her fulfilling life. I can always tell how much she enjoys her work through her conversations. Recently, I've been looking forward to hearing about her work during dinner or on weekends. With my busy wife, I've taken on the household chores. Since I didn't have much opportunity to do it while I was working, I often failed at household chores like cooking, laundry, and cleaning at first. Initially, I really came to appreciate what homemakers do. By the way, we have a son and a daughter. Thankfully, both have their own families and have been blessed with children, so I have happily become a grandfather. Though our children are living a bit away from us, they often visit us with our grandchildren, not just during holidays. Spending ample time with my adorable grandkids, who run up to me saying "Grandpa," is always a healing experience. I've also taken up a new hobby recently. With plenty of time on my hands, I've started a small vegetable garden in our backyard. This home gardening is surprisingly productive. The satisfaction of harvesting what I've grown is immensely gratifying. But there's one issue. We often harvest more than we can eat, just the two of us. What should we do? For now, I'm thinking of trying to make some dried vegetables this week. Hopefully it works out. We, both financially and time-wise comfortable, live happily doing the things we love. One day, we needed to go to the bank, so we decided to head out together. The closest branch was just a 10-minute walk from our house, so we decided to take a stroll there together. After walking for a few minutes, we could see the bank, but it seemed somewhat dim. As we got closer to the entrance, we realized it was closed off with shutters. Apparently, they were undergoing renovations. So unfortunately, the bank was closed that day.
Oh dear, it's closed.
Linda said, looking up at the notice.
Seems like it, but we need to go today. No choice but to head to the next town over.
Yes, I guess we have no choice.
Let's eat out while we're at it. It's good to have days like this once in a while. Just the two of us. We set off for another branch we usually don't visit, planning to dine out along the way. The bank at the other branch was extremely busy, probably because the nearby branch was closed. The staff at the counters all looked very busy.
Wow, it's really crowded here.
Yes, let's get a ticket number.
We approached a machine near a seemingly new bank employee.
Excuse me.
I said, reaching for a ticket.
Hello, what brings you here today?
The bank employee asked before I could take a number. His name tag says Williams.
We're here to make a withdrawal.
If that's the case, you can use the ATM, please.
Williams said, politely suggesting the ATM. However, the amount we needed to withdraw was more than what the ATM could handle. I decided to explain this to Williams.
We need a significant amount, so we'll need to go through the teller, please.
Williams' expression changed upon hearing my words.
Sir, do you really need this money today? Excuse me for asking, but are you aware of wire transfer fraud?
Williams asked with a stern face. He must have been concerned, I thought. Being a bank employee, he must have said this out of a sense of justice. Appreciating his kind consideration, I told him, It's for work, so it's not a scam. However, Williams was not convinced.
Why don't you reconsider? Is there any mistake?
Eventually, he said, I can't believe an elderly person would need such a large amount of money. He was clearly suspecting wire transfer fraud. No matter what I said, he stubbornly refused to serve us. But what to do? We had our reasons too. After all, we genuinely needed the money for a legitimate reason. We couldn't back down, especially since we had traveled to this place for that purpose. After a frustrating back and forth, realizing that we were not going to give up, Williams let out a heavy sigh. Then, he said something completely unexpected.
I'm terribly sorry, but as of now, due to the manager's decision, our senior customers cannot be served.
Incredibly, he was trying to force us out on a whim. I and Linda exchanged shocked looks. Behind us, other customers were lined up, forming a small queue, and of course, among them were some elderly people. Everyone looked a bit anxious. Once again, I asked him, what is that all about? Williams firmly repeated, elderly customers are not allowed to use our services. His attitude, which I had initially perceived as just, had become oppressive. Seeing this, Linda suddenly let out a sinister laugh. This was not good at all. William looked at my wife questioningly, but I held my head in despair. Because I knew that my wife laughs like this only when she is really angry. Thinking it was futile to argue with Williams, she spoke to another bank employee.
Hey, you there, the one with the pink tie. Can I have a word with you? Could you please contact the manager? Ask him to come to the president's office.
The bank employee my wife called over was wearing a pink tie. It was clear that he was quite senior and held some sort of position. He surveyed the interior of the store with a strict posture. Seeing Linda, his face turned pale. He exclaimed, "Understood, President Mrs. Smith?"
The president.
That lady is the president?
His sudden exclamation and action caused a stir among those present. The busy bank went silent for a moment, and all eyes were on us. In fact, Linda is the president of this major bank. Though it was her day off, we had some business at the bank. Unfortunately, our local branch was closed. We decided to visit this one partly for inspection. Williams, realizing the situation from his superior's attitude and words, had turned from pale to ashen.
I'm terribly sorry. I deeply apologize for my disrespectful behavior.
The branch manager desperately apologizes to us in the president's office.
Williams, you apologize too.
The branch manager had William apologize to us as well. It had turned into quite a situation. Standing next to my explosively angry wife, I watched the manager and Williams. They looked uncomfortable. I have only seen their frowns since we entered this room.
Why did you behave in such a manner?
Linda asked in a calm, presidential manner. Williams, prompted by a glance from the manager, answered,
It's because of the prevalence of wire transfer fraud. We were trained to be cautious when elderly customers handle large sums of money.
Of course, that's very important.
She acknowledged his point, but noted it was somewhat excessive.
We are requesting a withdrawal for a legitimate reason.
Yes,
It's important to make judgments without preconceptions. Sometimes it's crucial to listen to others' opinions.
William nodded his head, unable to speak. He was the youngest staff member at this branch. Perhaps that's why he became so flustered. But what was he in a hurry for? Curious, I asked him. He replied, I wanted to take credit for it.
I consulted others thinking they might take the credit.
Credit?
Well, if I prevent a fraud, I get praised and maybe even rewarded, right?
He said so with an innocent smile. Everyone was taken aback. No one expected such a reason behind his eagerness. It was a surprising response that seemed to deflate the tension. My dear, you can't cause discomfort to customers just to satisfy your vanity or self-fulfillment. Even if you suspect fraud, you need to explain it without making the customer uncomfortable. You are too forceful, Linda explained. Still, William seemed somewhat unconvinced. However, this incident turned out to be a fortunate case because the victim was us. If it had been another elderly person, it could have led to significant damage.
Many of the elderly customers who use our branch bank are wealthy. Isn't that right, manager?
When Linda asked the manager, he vigorously nodded his head in agreement. He looked regretful as he realized the mistake of his actions.
Do you realize the extent of the damage if they felt slighted and shifted their transactions, the bank could face a loss big enough to shut down.
With this explanation, Williams seemed to finally understand. He looked regretful as he realized the mistake of his actions.
This isn't just about him. We need to re-educate all the staff. And she stood up to leave.
Understood? I'm very sorry, the manager replied, looking slightly better. It seemed resolved. Phew, what an ordeal. Now to finish our business and grab a meal. Just as I was thinking this. At that moment, I believed that everything had been resolved. The four of us left the president's office. We headed back into the bank to complete our original transaction.
Shall we proceed with your withdrawal then?
The manager asked, personally attending to us. Williams was watching him closely, eager to learn the correct approach.
Yes, please.
I was about to respond when suddenly, bang! A loud noise echoed through the bank. We quickly looked towards the source of the sound and saw three individuals wearing ski masks. One of them was pointing a gun at the ceiling. The sound from earlier might have been caused by this gunshot. Then one of them started threatening a female bank employee. Give us the money. In his hand, he was holding a survival knife. The manager was so frightened that he screamed and collapsed on the spot. Williams, standing next to him, had turned deathly pale, frozen in place. What is this? A robbery? Despite the obviously alarming situation, I tried to stay as calm as possible. I glanced again at the ceiling where the supposed shot was fired. Curiously, the ceiling remained in pristine condition. I see, so that's what it was. It's a bluff, I realized. The gun must be a toy. There's no hole in the ceiling. I whispered to Linda. She nodded slightly after looking up.
T, don't resist or I'll shoot. Do as you're told. Put down your phones and gather here.
Employees and customers were herded together. They took away our cell phones, our means of communication.
Who's the manager of this bank?
Criminal leader bellowed in a commanding voice. Hearing this, the manager let out another whimper. Such a blatant reaction was only going to give away his position and earn the robber's disdain. Sure enough, the robber approached the manager and ordered, "Stuff the money in the bag." The manager, trembling with fear, hesitantly followed the instructions.
Don't even think about calling the cops.
The robber shouted, causing the manager to drop the money and stumble in fear. He must be feeling pressured, as the task is not progressing smoothly. The manager's body was covered in oily sweat. Just as the irate robber was about to yell at the manager again, I can see that the sound was small, but the sound of the police car siren can be heard. And that sound was indeed getting louder as it approached us.
Who the hell called them?
Bro, we gotta deal with this. They're coming.
Realizing the police had been alerted, the robbers started to panic.
Damn it. Change of plans. Close all doors and windows. Hey you, lower the shutter.
They ordered the manager. The manager pressed the lock button with a trembling hand. They decided to barricade themselves in the bank. I quickly surveyed the hostages. There were a few elderly individuals, some young women, and a child of about 2 years old. There were no strong young men.
Arrange a getaway vehicle.
One robber gave orders to the police using a megaphone. But the police weren't going to easily comply with such demands. Careful not to harm the hostages, the police began negotiating with them to release the hostages first. In the midst of this, the negotiations were becoming increasingly difficult. Both sides were making demands that neither wanted to concede.
Mommy, I wanna go home.
The 4-year-old girl started crying. She had been quiet for a while, enduring hunger and fear. However, the 2-year-old girl had finally reached her limit.
Damn it.
The criminal glared at the mother and daughter with intensity.
I'm sorry.
The mother said so, and at that moment an elderly woman approached the child. The woman made eye contact with the little girl and spoke to her gently.
Oh dear, it's all right.
She took out gloves from the pocket of her apron. When the woman spoke to her, the little girl stopped crying for a moment. In the meantime, the elderly woman turned the gloves into a puppet to capture the child's interest.
Hello, what's your name? How old are you? You're cute.
The puppet moved its fingers, mimicking speech. The girl, intrigued by this, stopped crying and started smiling. The elderly woman continued to engage with the child, who now seemed cheerful. Then the little girl started touching the glove puppet with a smile on her face. The woman gave the glove puppet to the girl, who then used it as a toy, pulling on it and putting her fingers inside. Instead of crying, she appeared to be in a much better mood. Seeing this, the elderly woman said, "I used to be a child care worker. You know, I love children." "You're such a cutie." She spoke to the mother with a warm smile. The mother lowered her head with a relieved expression. Then another elderly woman began comforting the mother, gently patting her back.
Are you pregnant, dear? Are you okay?
The elderly woman asked, and the mother nodded slightly. How did she know, I wonder? At first glance, her belly didn't appear swollen, and you couldn't tell she was pregnant just by looking. However, there was a maternity mark on the bag she was carrying over her shoulder. The woman noticed the mark and spoke to the mother. The elderly women surrounded the mother and child, protecting them.
Doing this here, all that stress is bad for your baby.
The elderly women murmured so, directing silent condemnation towards the criminals. The other customers joined in, giving the criminals cold glares. The robbers seemed to have their conscience pricked by that silent accusation, their eyes swimming. I looked around. Is there anything that can break this situation? Then I noticed a cane that someone had brought. This might be useful. I gently tapped the shoulder of an elderly man who was nearby. When the elderly man turned towards us, tilting his head slightly in our direction, I discreetly pointed to the cane, trying not to be noticed by the criminals. Seeing my gesture, the man nodded slightly, acknowledging the cue. The other elderly person beside him also did the same, giving us a knowing look. As the situation became clearer to him, the elderly man smiled and nodded in our direction. But at that moment, my wife Linda suddenly stood up, taking everyone by surprise.
What's going on, old lady?
The criminal leader shouted in response to her sudden action. Undeterred by their intimidating demeanor, Linda stepped forward and addressed the criminals with confidence. I am the president of this bank.
Isn't just me as a hostage enough?
Don't speak out of turn. Shut up.
The criminal snapped defiantly, raising his voice. Linda, undeterred by the criminal's outburst, continued speaking.
Please release the other people. There are children and pregnant women here. Some people aren't feeling well. If we get hurt or if something worse happens, your crimes will become even more severe.
Us.
The criminal was left speechless by Linda's reasonable argument.
Boss, what should we do?
The minions asked so, turning their gazes towards the leader. The leader appeared visibly shaken, contemplating the best course of action.
If we use this old lady as a hostage,
But if the police come in while we're releasing her,
the charges will be even more severe.
The minions each voiced their own thoughts as they spoke freely. The chaos on the side of the criminals became increasingly noticeable as they observed the hostages in silence. However, it was the leader of the robbers who ultimately silenced them with a stern command. "Quiet," she shouted at his minions, and the room fell silent in response to his forceful tone.
Listen up. If we don't get caught, none of these charges matter.
While it was a reckless perspective, the leader's strong words seemed to unite his henchmen's thoughts, and their chaotic discussions began to converge.
This was our chance. The elderly man with the cane and I seized the moment, moving quietly behind the criminals.
What?
The leader was surprised by the sudden action. I didn't hesitate and swiftly twisted the arm of the leader.
Ouch!
I added more pressure, causing the wincing criminal even more pain. With my full body weight, I held him down. This rendered the man unable to move anymore. The other elderly man with the cane efficiently disarmed the remaining criminals by striking their weapons with his cane. Another elderly man executed a judo throw. The criminals, now disorganized, were struggling to respond. Our roles as hostages and the criminals' positions were completely reversed. We thus succeeded in restraining the criminals. Almost simultaneously, police officers stormed into the bank.
Over here. The criminals are right here.
During our scuffle with the criminals, it seemed someone had quietly facilitated contact with the police. The elderly woman who had been a hostage appeared, guiding the police. As soon as the police entered, I released the restraints on the criminals and handed them over to the police. The approaching police officer gave me a courtesy salute. Thank goodness no one was injured. As I took a breath and relaxed, my eyes met with the police officer who was in charge of the scene. Spotting me, he hurriedly approached.
Thank you for your cooperation, John. You really helped us out here.
A natural smile spread across my face when I recognized that familiar face. And there was a reason for it, as he used to be my direct subordinate. To be precise, he might be better described as a former subordinate. This officer had been one of my most trusted subordinates during my time in the force. As I briefly explained the events to the police officer, the bank employee, "John, you are an amazing person. I deeply regret my rude behavior." His fast-paced speech and sparkling eyes conveyed his genuine admiration.
No, it was the bravery of everyone here that made the difference.
Indeed, everyone here is amazing. I was so impressed by everyone. I couldn't do anything myself.
William said so, looking somewhat downcast. I chuckled as I watched his expression.
The people in this community are really energetic. Even the elderly folks are full of vitality, which makes it reassuring for the police.
It was true that the people in this area were energetic. 2 individuals who helped me subdue the criminals were martial arts instructors, one in kendo and the other in judo. After retiring, they had dedicated their time to volunteering for crime prevention workshops and patrolling the area. Physically, they were no less fit than young adults. As for my wife, she had self-defense training, and she was confident that she would be AL1, right? Even if the criminals attacked her. I was slightly concerned about her level of confidence, given that she was my wife, but it was undeniable that she was a strong and capable woman. She held the position of bank president, carrying significant mental and physical responsibilities.
Oh, by the way.
The police officer said so, as if he remembered something.
Oh, by the way, that person, the manager, is quite competent as well. After swiftly contacting the police, he pretended to be frightened and delayed the criminals. Thanks to him, we were able to arrive at the scene before any casualties occurred.
I couldn't help but admire the manager's quick thinking. Despite always appearing frightened with a shaky voice, he was a clever strategist. I thought that he was a brilliant man.
It seems like everyone at the bank is well trained. That's why you can respond so quickly in these situations. It's impressive for a company.
The police officer smiled quietly as he spoke. When the bank was praised, I was happy because I felt as if Linda the president had been honored. I looked at the elderly people in this town and thought of certain individuals, my grandparents. Both of them are old and frail now. That's why I feel a strong urge to protect the elderly, just like I should protect my grandparents. Even with online scams, I strongly desired to prevent them before they happened. But today I witnessed an astonishing reality. All of these people were incredibly lively, and it turned out that I, who was almost overwhelmed, was the one being protected. The fact of the fraud and the reality that nothing had happened to me, I felt a kind of shock. Seeing me in that state, John started talking to me.
I do want to stay healthy for as long as possible, but we never know what the future holds.
I was about to say that's not true, I thought to myself, but John's expression was quite serious.
Unfortunately, that's the reality. Tomorrow we might be confined to our beds. So while we can, we want to think and act as much as possible.
I see.
Your desire to protect is admirable and makes me happy. But don't judge elderly people solely based on their age. Of course, some people genuinely need help, so it's best to offer assistance after getting to know each individual and understanding their situation.
Listening to that, I realized that even among the elderly, there are various types of people. It might be wrong to assume they all need protection because they are considered weak. Also, just as there are active elderly people, some young individuals might be pregnant or have young children to care for, and there are many people with invisible illnesses and conditions. I had overlooked these facts. It was like scales falling from my eyes. He muttered to himself, being kind and gentle to everyone, not just the elderly. It felt like those words had become a motto that infiltrated my mind. It gave me a new goal and a surge of motivation. Williams had regained his natural sparkle in his eyes. With everything settled, the criminals were apprehended by the police. Now I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Today we had been truly challenged. I thought this as I patted my shoulder. I had remembered the real reason I came here. I still hadn't deposited the money. Actually, my eldest daughter had just built a new house recently. In addition to that, my eldest son's wife had given birth. There were also celebrations for my grandchildren starting school. We needed money in quick succession.
It seems like celebrations require cash after all.
My wife standing beside me also had a troubled expression. Then, the bank manager appeared, straightening his wrinkled suit. He smiled kindly and said, "I'm sorry for the delay, but I'm here to assist you." After successfully celebrating our children and grandchildren, our life as a couple returned to peace. It was springtime. The weather had been warming up here lately, making it perfect for planting vegetable seedlings. Tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, it was ideal for planting vegetables. However, I had a failed experience last year. I had miscalculated the amount I needed to plant, resulting in a surplus of cucumbers. We ended up using them even in miso soup. This year, I needed to be more careful to avoid such a situation. But well, if I still had excess, I could pack them in bags and sell them as $1 vegetables. That also sounded fun. However, since I was controlling the planting amount this way, there might be some extra space in the garden. If there was room, I wanted to plant sunflower seeds, which my wife liked. She would surely be delighted. I started planning a bit ahead for the upcoming days. As I did, I became more and more excited about the summer to come. My cell phone made a lively sound on the desk. It was the notification sound for someone liking my recent post. Lately, I have been hooked on sharing updates about my garden on social media. The person who liked it was one of my elderly neighbors. Just like me, they enjoy trying new things and had a curious spirit. They spent their days discovering new things and enjoying their retirement. I wanted to be like them. Even as I got older, I wanted to stay active. I wanted to contribute within my capabilities and continue to help others. I'm still very much in the game. I have plenty of dreams, hopes, and excitement. I plan to live my second life beautifully, hand in hand with my family and the people in my community. For that reason, I'll give it my all today, just like always.